This is a pre-recorded interview that I was actually supposed to have an Instagram live with London-based poet and author Bame, but there were issues with the technical part of things, so we're doing a pre-recorded session. Bame joins me now with a full interview on her poetry journey. Recently released just the other weekend, and I was available for the launch, and I thought she should join us to let us know what her vision for the book was. Hi, Bame.
Hi, how are
We're,
you?
let's hope for the best this time around.
And I'm at work, so you might hear a few voices outside that are not
Oh.
mine. But yeah,
We'll make it work. It's better than the last time. At least I can hear you and you can hear me.
perfectly. Yeah.
Great. So let's start off from the beginning, as always. Who is Bame?
Bami is a young author. She is a young Botswana woman who grew up in Botswana, went to school in London. I'm a sister, I'm a friend. I'm just a young person in Botswana trying to make it, basically.
Cool. So a young creative in Botswana doing her thing and sharing it with the world.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Amazing. So, do you remember your earliest encounter with poetry? Because as we all know, you're a poet and now you're an author. Do you remember when words became easy for you to document on pieces of paper and how it all began? Where did it all begin from?
I think I've always thought of myself as first a fictional story writer than a poet. So I've
Ooh,
always yeah, most of my friends were actually surprised, myself included, that my first book was about poetry. But I think it had to do more with the message of the book than anything else, because there was a point where I wanted to share that with the world. But I've been reading since I was in junior school, and I mean, actually reading so much literature, it seemed insane at the time. And I've been writing since junior school, but my most prominent encounter with poetry was when I was at St. Joseph's College. We had a
mm-hmm.
poetry club, amazing. We would mix in with the hip hop club, and they would come in and they would make beats to the poems. It was such an amazing experience for me, not only to express myself through poetry, but to see it as more than what we've been taught it is as we're growing up. It was, and for me, it became a source of self expression, but also it was just a fun way to spend a Friday afternoon.
That's interesting that you took something that was maybe just introduced to you in a very traditional way and you customized it for yourself and made it work for your personality and for
Yeah.
all other interests that govern poetry. So I think that was very interesting that you've built it into the point that it is at today. I think that's very commendable. As for the book, like you're saying, it's not something that you thought you would be as real and as raw about. One would
Mhm.
think because of the nature of the subject, like you had said just now, you were used to maybe doing something more fictional, something more, what is the word? Just something more fictional, as opposed to
Yeah.
something as real and honest as raw. So for you to come out with your first book and for it to introduce you to the world of publishing or the world of having people have an actual document on your work, and for it to be something as vulnerable as mental health, take us through the process of that, the entire making of the book.
Yeah, you would know this, like I said at the launch, and as we've spoken a few times, this book was written over a period of 8 years. It wasn't something that I sat down to write. And so I think in having it being written over 8 years, it was me just documenting certain moments in my life where poetry was the only thing that could give me healing and understanding of what I was going through. So in that sense, the book itself, the writing of the book was the less difficult part, if I'm to be honest. I decided to publish the book last year on the 22nd of February. And that's when I contacted the publisher. I wrote my last poem in the book about a month later, and then we started the publishing process. But I think the hardest thing for me with the book was actually getting the last draft of it, and the publisher telling me, if you approve this, it's going to be online in a few days. And that's when I realized that I've wanted to do this for a long time, in terms of like actually expressing myself through poetry and having other people read that poetry, because I watch a lot of YouTube videos, especially poetry sessions where they use poetry to talk about their mental health, and I've been able to identify and find a little comfort from those. And so with deciding to publish this book, that was my line of thought. But when I actually got the last draft, I was like, oh wow, it didn't through, because literally the entire world can access to what goes on in your mind, and not just now, but what you've been experiencing and feeling for the past 8 years. Very
Right.
daunting. And given that we're still in a place where there's a lot of stigma, especially in Botswana, about mental health, where people don't have understanding, and the easiest things that come to them are probably, they probably have wrong information, as we've spoken about at the launch, in terms of how our language associates with mental health. So because of those things, and it wasn't, and also having to realize that my family is going to read my book as well, and they are going to have their own as well, the world. I found myself thinking, am I actually gonna do this? I mean, it was not late enough. It was not too late to back out, but I mean, here we are, and
Wow.
I think,
I do think I never actually really thought about that, like in terms of family and reception. I know your aunt had spoken at the book launch in support of you, but I'm sure there were
yeah,
other people who had different feelings. How did you navigate that? I think even just above from family, even friends, just people who know you deeply but may not know this part of you. How did you navigate all those feelings of, okay, it's fine, whatever, I'm just going to put it out?
yeah.
Did you have
Yeah.
also people coming through and saying, Bame, why did you not tell us about this? Or, how could we have been there for you and so on and so forth? How was the reception from people in your immediate circle?
I had somebody actually at the launch, a very wonderful young lady who is a writer as well, ask me that very same question. She was telling me that she wants to publish something very vulnerable, and she was concerned about how people receive it. And I told her that one of the things that I've learned with my mental health journey is that I have to be very selfish with my time and with my emotions. So if I come to you and tell you my truth, either in a conversation or in my book, then you feel some type of way about it, be, despite the fact that I will always try to make you understand where I'm coming from and understand where you're coming from. But if you end up not being able to accept what I'm going through, I have to, and I've had to do this before, I've had to put my mental health first and remove myself from situations and from people that have not been receptive in my truth. And there has been a more positive response than I actually thought. I'm not going to lie, because I
Oh,
always, yeah, I thought that most people would be like, would feel some sort of betrayal in that they didn't know what I was going through all of this time. But I think one
right.
of the things that has helped, that I've always been upfront about the fact that you can't explain to people what you don't understand. Just because the first poem that I have is a 2011 and they had the word depression in it, I just finished from 5. I'm pretty sure I did not grasp the magnitude of what I was saying at the time. It took a long time
Wow.
for me to actually understand what was going on with me and what caused it and what I need to work through it. So in all of those years, I couldn't understand myself, and so I can't be blamed then for not being able to explain to somebody else. But in all, I think the reception has been, people have been more open to understanding. Not everybody has been fully understanding, but people at least show interest in trying to understand where I'm coming from and the part that they can play in protecting their mental health and also allowing me to find healing as well.
Great. That sounds exciting.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you had that kind of reception for a piece that
Yeah.
is so honest, for a book that is so honest, that it had an accommodating audience to back it up. Speaking of an
Yeah.
accommodating audience, I'm sure the decision to release the book, you could, be like, okay, I'm going to release the book, and you're not going to literally interact with people who will read it. You could get away with that, but deciding to have a launch, I'm sure must have been like, wow, I'm going to have to be at the forefront of it all. I'm going to have to answer questions. How important was it to you, or how much work did you put into creating a safe space for the launch itself? Because I think that set the tone even for how we should receive the book and how we should receive or even deal in our own intimate lives with the issue of mental health. So how much work
Yeah.
into went into in the preparation of that?
I think it was a great thing that you said that.
Okay, I can't. Okay, cool. So I don't know if we're still live, but I'm seeming to have a bit of an issue with Bami. I'm sure she'll resolve it very quickly. But in a nutshell, what we've spoken about thus far is we've looked at her kind of explaining to us the process behind the book. She's mentioned it's something she did out of sheer accountability to herself in terms of writing a book that would hold her accountable for her growth, in terms of understanding mental health, or even putting a label to it, as she's developed from a young scholar or a young graduate of high school to where she is now as a woman and as someone who's developed in her understanding and perception of the world. Bame has also given us a bit of insight as to the launch itself, which is something she's going to go more in depth about. But she spoke about the panel of discussions in brief, and I'm excited because I know that when she comes back, we'll talk about it at length. But I really am interested in hearing from her in terms of the launch, how much work she put into it, because it was a very fascinating launch. I personally enjoyed it. It took place last weekend at Culture Art Cafe, and it had just a great ambience. I thought when I was going for the event myself, I had reservations. I was like, what if it's not as open-minded? What if there are people who are not open to hearing what she has to say? I hadn't met Bame before this. I hadn't even seen the book itself. So I was like, I didn't know what to expect. So I'm so glad that she put a lot of work into creating this amazing atmosphere. There were a lot of honest discussions during the session, during the launch itself. There was a lot of conversation surrounding mental health, specifically in the context of Botswana, which is always important to not just talk about things, but to talk about them in the context of Botswana. For we are looking at Botswana, and we're looking at Botswana mental health and how we can progress first here back at home, and then overall in the entire kind of global scheme of things, or in the rest of the world. Our impact should first be felt at home. So I will just be waiting on Bame to tell us more about that, and then we will also proceed to ask her my biggest question, which is, as a creative, how did she navigate going through the process of creating, not only creating the book itself, but how she gathered courage and all the emotions that went into putting it out there. As a creative who is seeking to um, kind of influence the world myself and kind of have a great social impact myself. I've done 3 documentaries. I've done one on colorism, I've done one on toxic masculinity, and I've done 4 documentaries, and I've done one on sexual assault, and uh, another one on social integration, so to speak. And so, during the course of doing these 4 documentaries, my main issue was really just looking at, I would look at these issues and I would address them, and it was, I'd say, easier to address them because it was stuff I had dealt with. My creative process usually involves that I deal with things before I speak about them. So usually when I'm talking about colorism, it's because I've dealt with body positivity image in my own life, and so it's been easier for me to kind of relay and encourage and inspire other people from a place where I myself am inspired by my work. So the reason I personally have not done one on mental health is because mental health for me is such an up and down thing. One minute I'm fine, the next minute I'm not feeling so great. And my biggest kind of fear is actually releasing a documentary where I myself one day look at it and I'm like, I can't relate with what I'm saying, or I'm not as positive as the person doing the documentary at the time. Basically maintaining this clean line, or this high of basically just being in a great position and speaking about mental health and being hopeful, because it's not the easiest thing to do. So I wanted Bame to come and speak to us about that. She's just dropped me a message that her batteries died. So I'm going to try to do this again with her another time, and then I'll connect the video to this as soon as she is able to talk. So that's probably going to come in a few minutes. But otherwise, thank you for watching thus far, and we'll be joining you in a couple of seconds. So I've just been speaking to London-based poet and now author from Botswana, Bame, and she's going to be taking us through now, after everything we've spoken about. I'm sure you guys are excited to hear more. She'll now be taking us through what she went through in terms of creating the launch, because it was an exciting launch. I personally enjoyed it. And so we'll be hearing from her about how the launch went, and then we'll be ending off with hearing from her perspective what, like me, people who are in the creative scene, what they can do to be part of the solution. So we'll be talking to Bame in a couple of seconds, wrapping up this fascinating interview about her book, The Poetic Journey. Hi, Bame.
Hello.
Great. So let's kick off
Yes.
from talking about the ambience for the launch itself and all the prep that went into that.
So talking about how we prepared for the launch.
Right.
Yeah. Like I said, for me, the launch was going to be a representation of the book itself, and the book is all about mental health. So the launch was meant to be a way. I've always said that the book for me is a mechanism that we can use to forward the conversation on mental health in Botswana. And given that I wanted the launch to be as such, having a clear indication of what the launch was going to be allowed us to have a clear guest list. And then because we knew we wanted to event and the kind of environment that we wanted to create. We wanted a safe environment where people can have an open conversation and feel comfortable in that environment. Because one of the biggest problems with mental health is we encourage people to be open about their problems, but more oftentimes than not, when they are open, that either met with ridicule or they're met with people not accepting what they have to tell them, as if you can tell me something about my psyche that I don't know. So for me, the launch was about inviting the right people and having an environment that allowed everyone to interact in a way that was safe and in a way that could actually progress the conversation. So having that in mind actually made it easier to plan the launch, because we weren't looking for certain people who had certain things to offer that were not actually according to what we were looking for. There were a lot of other people that could have made it to the launch, but they weren't invited because they used their platforms for what we didn't want to be at the launch. And that's not to say anything about anyone. That's to say that if somebody else had an event, I might not be invited because my sole focus as a social activist is mental health, and they're looking for something different. And so I think in us preparing for the launch, that's something that actually stuck with me, and that's something that made the launch what it was. Because I don't think that the conversation that we had at that panel would have been possible if we had not been careful about the kind of environment that we're trying to create.
Totally. I agree with that. That is so true, because I like that you understand the importance, or you've considered your work to be a tool in solving mental health or being the solution in your own capacity as Bame, in terms of helping mental health in Botswana and helping us achieve and maintain our mental health. That made it clear for you to kind of be more not picky, but to have a certain criteria and in terms of energy and who is allowed to come to this launch and what will facilitate the way people receive the book in itself. That's from a creative standpoint. I'm very grateful that you were able to consider such factors in the launching of your book into the world. And as Botswana, we were able to see it. When we remember the book, that's the first thing that pops into our heads. We remember the launch. So it definitely went a long way in re-emphasizing or reinforcing your mandate for the book itself.
Yeah.
That being said, I would want to get into discussions now as from a creative standpoint, what we can do in our own capacities, just as you have, what you would advise us to do in our own creative capacities to kind of be part of the solution in terms of mental health in Botswana.
I think one of the greatest things that I've come to appreciate since coming back to Botswana is that a lot of Botswana youth have been very open to different creative avenues. We now have a lot of people that are supporting Botswana YouTubers. You go on Instagram, you go everywhere. We have a lot of people that now, companies that are now willing to sponsor YouTube videos. We now have a lot of people who have influence on Instagram, people who have influence on Facebook, on Twitter. And that's because they have all of that, because as a country, we are now gearing towards the art. Now, as young people, we can actually decide on a Saturday, instead of going somewhere, we can decide to go to an art gallery and enjoy someone's art. We have poetry night on Tuesday. I think it's every Tuesday at the Test Kitchen. we now get to appreciate art. And I think because of that, it has become a large medium of which, as the youth, we can use to further the conversation about mental health. I think one of the most important things, though, in encouraging people to use our platforms is understanding that not everyone has the same experience with others. And in given that, I also want to acknowledge that everybody has their platform, and that platform already has a mandate. And just because mental health is not their mandate doesn't mean that when I encourage other people to use that platform and they don't use it, that's something to hold against them. I've chosen to make this mine, and other people have theirs as well. But the most encouraging thing for me is just people being honest and sharing that truth. But that can be a very hard and intimidating thing to do. Because one of the most important things is, as someone who a lot of young people look up to, and they've seen all the glamour and glitz to your life, but you're struggling with a certain mental health issue, if you want to come out and say, this is what I'm struggling with, then that can bring a lot of hope and a lot of peace to people who actually feel like they're going through this alone. Just as Botswana, there are a lot of American or British celebrities that we look up to, and every time one of them speaks to an issue that's close to our heart, because of human nature, it just makes you feel more understood, and it makes you feel like it's something that the world actually cares about. Even if the world would come out and say they care about it, but having somebody that you look up to, somebody that's an influencer in your life, come out and say that, it's something that could actually go a long way into helping a lot of people open up and start a conversation that's not half-hearted. But in saying that, I also understand that not everybody is ready to talk about their mental health, and not everybody is ready to expose that part of their lives. And so if you are part of that group that is not ready to do that, you can engage in any way, small or big, in addressing mental health. One of the speakers in the panel, Ratanan, who talked about the fact that over 20% of the youth in the world statistically go through one or more mental health issues, but only less than 5% of the world budget is dedicated towards mental health. Influencers and creatives in Botswana have the opportunity to actually raise funds because of the companies that they work to on a day-to-day basis. If it's not something that you can do on a personal capacity, then support a mental health course. There are a lot of organizations, there are a lot of social activists who actually do a lot towards mental health, but they don't have the funds to do certain things. They're looking for sponsorship. So you can use your brand to actually work with these people, and then help them find funding for the certain different things that they need to do in order to encourage the conversation. So it's not just about putting yourself out there. It's not about only just being able to find sponsorship for people. It's also about giving a platform in the space that you operate in, because I think it's important that we need to realize each creative has their own mandate. But in your mandate, in what you are doing, it's important that if you can find the space to give a voice to somebody that's talking about mental health, somebody that's bringing awareness, somebody that's sharing that story. And I think that's some of the ways that we can actually, as creatives in Botswana, help each other, support each other. And I think that's another thing. I am not in any way, I believe I'm a creative in Botswana, but I am in no way as well known or as most people are. But it would mean a lot if people that have a lot of influence in the country actually supported. There are a lot of social activists in Botswana that don't have big platforms. There are a lot of mental health activists that I found while preparing for the launch and inviting them, but most of them are unknown because they don't have the platform. They don't have such a big following in all of the social media. So it's as easy as actually sharing someone's event. It's as easy as sharing someone's page and saying, this is what they're dealing with, go support them. And in that way, you're somebody who's following you who might be having a mental health issue but not able to say it to you or to anyone else might go to this page, find something that can actually help them move a little step towards healing.
Wow, that is the reason I'm so immersed into your responses. It shines something that I noticed about you even at the launch is shining through right now as you speak. And that would be just the mere idea of two things. First of all, the first, I like that your launch in itself, as much as you released an amazing book, you provided solutions and a wide range of them. And what that does is it makes us now accountable to say, fine, maybe we can't write books, right? Maybe we can't write books, but there's a variety of things you can do. And I like that you've carefully outlined the different ways that we can all fit into that. And I think that inclusiveness, or that inclusive part of your work, or even the way that you go about being active in the mental health movement, is it shines through even when you speak about creatives, when you talk about platforms, when you talk about whether we have many following, we have a large following or we have a little following, whether we're starting out or we're not. But you speak about how we all have the capacity to have an impact. And I think that's very interesting for everyone to note. You speak about how you may not be a full-on activist where you use your platform every single minute to contribute to the cause. And I like that you were also able to take into account that some people are dealing with their own things, and some people may not be comfortable to go online and speak about their troubles. But that doesn't stop you from adding to the mental health movement. That doesn't stop you from being active. You could do it in the close corners. It doesn't have to be a public thing. It doesn't have to be something you do for clout. It doesn't have to be something you put on social media for the world to see. But doing something like that, if anything, even helps you feel better about yourself as a human being who's also dealing with maintaining mental health in your own life. Something I like to say to people all the time is, take care of you for me. Sometimes you may feel that you may not have, or even the mere thought of being able to take care of so many people is a scary thought. You might think, oh, where do I start from? But taking care of yourself, being able to do what's best for you, being able to do what's therapeutic for you, is the best thing that you can do for the world. Sometimes it's just as seemingly small, but it's big in its own kind of essence. I like that you had also mentioned in our previous talks about how the book in itself is therapy. So I hope that creatives may find that in their own creative processes, where they find an outlet for their own emotions and their own mental battles through their work. That being said, in closing, I would want to know, and I'm sure a lot of people would love to as well, information on how to get a hold of the book.
Okay, so currently the book is being distributed by various books. You can find them on Facebook, or you can go to my Facebook page, Bame the Writer, and then we've shared the link to various books. So located in Main Mall. So currently, that's where you can get the book, or you can also go on the page, and then you'll find flyers to the launch where they have a number that you can call to get the book. So we're still working on having it distributed not only in Gaborone, but finding certain in the big towns, finding certain places where it can become available. But all of that information is available on the Facebook page by the Writer.
Cool. And how much is the book going for at the moment?
So at the moment, the book is 150. I know a lot of people were a little confused. So there was a pre-launch sale where the book was 100 pula and a free ticket to the launch. So the original price of the book is 150 pula. That's what it's sold at now.
Okay, so you've heard it from her already, guys. Bame has released a book, and it's now in Botswana in Main Mall at
So just opposite NGB, it's a Vera's book.
Just opposite NGB at Main Mall. It's going for 150 pula. It's called The Poetic Journey Within My Sorrow, right? And it's by Bame. If you need any more information, you can get in touch with Bame. Yes, Bame G Thokwane, right?
Correct.
Great, got it right. So you can get Bame's book at opposite NDB and Main Mall, or you can get in touch with her on Facebook or on Instagram, Bame the Writer. There's also a number on the flyer that was previously put out for the launch of the book, probably on the Culture Art Cafe page itself. So you can call that number and find out information on how to get a copy of the book. That concludes our interview. I'm glad we finally got to do this. I was afraid that there'll be so many hiccups, but we've made it work, and I couldn't be more proud. This is like my favorite interview thus far. Thank you for your time, Bame. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and congratulations on the book.
It's been a little bit of a struggle, but I'm glad that we got to do this, and I hope that this conversation, as all conversations that I intend to have, doesn't end here, and we can have more creators and more engaged in it, and let's just see what we can do for ourselves and for others in terms of mental health.
True, I code that. I agree with that. All right, thank you so much, Bame. Thank you for your time. Enjoy your day. Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.